Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Paranormal the New Normal. I know it's been a minute since I did one of these live. Woo! It's been a month or so. And what can I say? People aren't reaching out like they used to, and I don't look for it. You guys know I got so many episodes backed up. It's releases for years. But welcome, everybody. Hope your Sunday mornings are going well. I'm very happy to start off a couple interviews coming up with this first one. This guest, I think, is going to interest us all in many ways. Let me introduce Doug Red Hail Pineda. Welcome, Doug.
Jeremy, thanks so much for the invite. It's good to see you.
Good to have you here. Folks, Doug is the founder of the Church of Psychedelics. Yes. The founder. I mean, I saw that. I couldn't say no to this interview. I'm like, I need to interview this person. I'm like, this is something that needs to be done. It was stated. And no, I'm not psychedelics when I say that. But, folks, well, Doug, why don't you start us off by telling us what got you into the spiritual paranormal world, whatever you prefer to call it?
Oh, what got me in? That's a good one to start with. Usually, people ask, "How did the Church of Psychedelics get founded?" But how that is even such an even more significant question. Um, so, I'm an Army brat. I had, typical military family moving around every 2.5 to 3 years. Anywhere from the United States all around the world. And this particular frame of time, I was about probably around 9 to 12-ish, and I was living in Oregon, and we lived in this little town called Gladstone, Oregon, which is outside of Portland, Oregon. And that town is, as anybody's ever been to Oregon, you'll see that is one of the most beautiful states in the entire country. It is just majestic forests from like as far as the eye can see, and if you're driving down the highway, even you can even you can't even see 6 feet into the forest because it's so dense. Once it's there, it's just teeming with life and nature and beauty. And I was a latchkey kid, getting home after school, and you dump your backpack and your jacket and on the front door, and you run through the house through the back door, and and I ran straight into the forest, and that was pretty much my one of the most beautiful parts of my life growing up. Well, around that time, I had already been connected. The fam. It was people have like when you're as a child, you have like a touch of that worldly sense. That intuitive sense. Your instincts are a little bit heightened back then. There's nothing encumbering you. And back then, it was as old. Telling my age is that back then there was not even that. There was not even email. Not even not a pager, not a cell phone, and certainly not the internet. So I was unencumbered with the tethers of distraction on the outside world.
The good
So
old days, yes, the good
good
old days.
old days, exactly. Yeah, I don't think. I think right then was maybe Pong was coming out, like Atari was just about to come out that year, or something. So that's the era to put everybody in perspective. So the woods were my home, and the woods went so far that our property backed up to well, it wasn't our property, we rented, but our little double wide trailer was backed up to a forest, and that forest connected to a national forest. So it just went on for as any 8, 9 year old's imagination can go. So I have a deep relationship with that woods. I was connected, if that's what you could say. And it was a day. It just there's not a lot of sunny days in Oregon, but this one was. And it had just rained just a little bit earlier. It was just one of those just magical times. This light rain, the forest kind of just brightened up, opened up from that rain, and the clouds parted, sun came through, and it was almost like I hate to say the word Disneyland, but or like a Disney movie, but it was like a Disney movie where I was getting my way to my natural spot, which took about a 6, 8, 10 minute, something like that, as from memory, to like run to my spot. And that spot was a place in the forest where was working on a treehouse. Not a good one or anything, but just a makeshift. I had some boards and, got a chance to, put it, 20, 30 feet up in the air and, have a place to perch basically and just kind of observe below. And I was making my way to that spot. And as I was rounding that, I was running to that spot. And as I was rounding the corner of this huge, large blackberry bush, Um, I kind of sped around the corner, and the forest, I guess the reason I said it was as dense as it is because this was kind of an extraordinary spot. For some reason, this spot in the forest was open naturally, not by anything human made or anything. It was just like an open spot. And this open spot, which is not much, probably maybe 20 feet by like 20 feet, like not huge, but shining through when the sun finally came, as it was, like I said, for Oregon, it was coming through and was like you could see this huge spot of sunshine. And in the middle of it was a fox and a small black-headed, I think they call it chickadee. Um, uh, shoot, I forget the name of that bird, but it's called a black-headed chickadee. It's a little small bird, and this fox was very calm, sitting on its haunches, like kind of a cat does or a fox does, and it's just sitting there, and it's intently looking at this bird, and this bird is very um activated. I would say, I don't know if it was I don't know, it was upset, I don't know what it was, but it was chirping at the feet of the fox, looking up at it and bouncing around at its feet. And when I came around the corner, I startled both of them, and I was startled because I had never seen a fox in real life that close. I was probably just like 10 feet away. Um, and I came to a sliding stop, and I kind of remember it was a sliding stop because it had just rained, and where the sun was, usually there's no grasses on the forest floor, but this kind of, because the sun hit this area, there was some like light grasses and around, and they were wet. So when I came around, I slid. That's why this memory is so visceral in my mind. And I was like kind of sliding a little bit. And I'm like, whoa, 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 because I could like fall down and slide into this animal. And that's the first thing that ever happened to me, to where it was kind of this otherworldly experience. This bird stopped, and the fox, I remember, looked very just slowly over at me, very calmly, and the bird looked quickly at me and kind of like, and it gave this, I could see the look in his black little beady eyes, and it gave this, it kind of hopped up and down. It didn't chirp, but you could tell it was annoyed with me, like, again, or like I interrupted them. And then the bird just kind of looked at the fox, looked at me, and then flew away. But the fox didn't move. And the fox looked at me, and the first time I had what could be, this is the first, it's a telepathic event. There's nothing else to say it. I know people are used to hearing that, but in my mind, when the fox looked at me, it had kind of known me because it had seen me in the forest for a long time, and it just considered me like, oh, that's a human, but that's a human that's part of the forest. It does its thing and then it goes away, and it knew me, but I never knew. But in my mind, I had that understanding. There's no other better way to put it, but an understanding, like it had almost played like a small video that was kind of watercolory in a way, or see-through in a way, of it not seeing me, but kind of this understanding that it knew what I was, or it kind of like what I was. Now, it didn't see me as like a boy. It just saw me as another part of the forest. And in it, it just said, like, this kind of question, like, do you, like, yes, like, do you question or involved? Like, it was no words, no human words, but just this feeling. And it was very pure feeling. It was like I kind of knew what it kind of knew, but there was this in between shared space of this understanding. And it was kind of a resonant in my heart and almost in my chest at the same time, of this understanding. And it asked me, would you like to know? Like, are you inside of the knowing? And that is the first time in my head of the word knowing came up. And that was my first time. And it's, it was the experience of a, 8.5, 9 year old. So I don't exactly remember all of it, but it was this, I can just tell you, it was overwhelming inside of my experience of this. I was in communication inside of a knowing container with this fox, and it had asked me, or kind of like set the stage of like, we're in a container. Do you want to communicate? Do you like, is there something that you are in need? Like, are you in danger? Like, why are you, because I was running, and that's the first time that it ever came around. And then this is a short experience, and when I couldn't quite connect, I had the choice. Jeremy, that's the interesting thing about it. It was like it was by will or by choice that I had the ability to be in the knowing. Like it's like you're on the fringe, you just settle into it and you're inside of it. And that's what the fox taught me, or just kind of like let me know. He's like, just go into it. And I couldn't. I was so mesmerized by the experience. And then it got frustrated. Not frustrated, that's a wrong word. It just got like, okay, like that's fine. Like it's not like you can't do it or anything. It was like that was the moment. And it just got up and walked away the opposite direction. And at that moment, I had such a profound experience with that. I wanted to know, what is this experience? And then in my head, this was the big click. Who just said that? And that was the first time, without understanding that, again, no digital, no nothing to be able to Google and look or research or find out. But it was in my mind, it was like, what is that voice in my head? And that's when I started to understand the observer and the observed. And that was kind of the start of a journey of, always in the background, these little things started to add up, like these experiences, that we have a larger, more expansive element of our humanity than just what we can see and what we're, what school was, or, how home life was, or anything like that. There was this other thing that was happening. I'm like, why isn't anybody talking about this? I've never heard about this, and that's kind of where it was. And I just thought, oh, this is just something that humans go through, like this other thing that, I don't know what it is. And then as you just kind of go along life and you hear about other things, you're like, ooh, don't talk about that. That's weird. Right? That's what the world tells you. So,
Exactly.
right. And what the
And
thing was is my dad had taught me to meditate at 8 years old. And so I was at starting at 8 years old, I was a pretty consistent meditation practitioner. And I think just those two things kind of match up. I was in a meditative space, and then this incident happened, over a period of time, of course. And then, but the two kind of came in together, and pretty soon this question of, what's that voice in my head? And this, animals can communicate. Why don't people just, people are talking about this, and that's where it started, those two things. And then my thoughts started to get, from time to time deeper here and there, or I would get into these like looping kind of things in my mind when you would meditate, as part of just normal meditation practice, and it would just take me deeper. And then and I wasn't walking around like this, it was sporadic, but that's kind of where it started. So thank you for the question.
yeah, I always like
I
to get
really,
I always like to get a grasp of where that click was, because everybody in this world had that click at some point, and it's always fascinating to hear when it happened. Like it's just, and there's so many similarities between different people's click stories that it's like the universe works in mysterious ways. It definitely does. And hello, Beth, if you're still watching, thank you for watching. Sorry, Beth, didn't want to interrupt that. That I could listen to this man tell a story all day. Like he's got that natural storytelling voice. But
oh,
uh, well, and the fact he grew up in Oregon made my heart smile a little bit. I mean, Bigfoot country supreme out there. But and when you're talking about those forests being so dense, I'm like, yep, that's why it's Bigfoot kingdom, because they can hide there well. But
hmm.
not the woods around me, you can see from one road to the next. So forget about it. Ain't know where they're hiding in there. At least not the smart ones. But so after you had that first experience, I'm assuming they kept happening. When did you start actually trying to figure out what was happening?
Okay, so we were about to, this is in the early 80s, probably around 81ish, and Mount St. Helens, whatever year Mount St. Helens blew up. That was, I think it was 1980 or 1981, somewhere right around there, without a quick check. And that's why I remember this era of time, because the next thing that happened was, I had just mentioned that, I was probably a, um I was in a meditative state, and it was at night. And what I mean by a meditative state is that, those, this is so funny. You know how when you're like 9 years old or something like that, or 10 or whatever, and your parents put you to bed, and you're like, "What are you doing putting me to bed? It's not even light. It's still light out." You're like, "Oh," and then they're like, "You get to bed," like whatever. Okay, I can't. I don't. It was something along those lines. Like, what am I? I'm just basically the idea is I'm just laying in bed and I've got nothing to do, and no, there's no phone, there's no anything. You're just sitting there and like, ugh, I
Yep.
cannot, I better not get out of bed. I can't make another excuse I'm thirsty or whatever it is, or like, so I'm just laying there. And so I'm just lightly meditating, I just kind of know how to get in that state. I'm like, okay, just kind of close my eyes and center because it's a pleasant space inside. There's this other realm to explore in meditation. And so I have nothing else to do. And it's not like I'm sitting there like, I got to do my meditation practice at 9 years old or whatever. It's not like that. It's like nothing else to do. So that's what I did. And remember when I said just a bit earlier about looping? So I
Yeah.
got into this idea, and sometimes it's still in the same era of time, the same kind of like year-ish. You know what? Because you asked that question, and I wasn't expecting it, I should probably get my timelines down. But it's like within this period of time, and this with this Fox happened. So what I'm getting at is it's still at the top of my mind that who is this voice in my head? Because I can kind of separate it on a daily basis. No, I'm not thinking that. I'm just going around, getting on the bus, going to school, coming home, whatever. I'm not thinking
Yeah.
like I'm not philosophizing anything at that age. But every once in a while, when it's quiet, I'd be like, I'm gonna try to get that voice again. Okay, is this my thought? Am I really thinking? And then I would be able to separate out like, ooh, there's that voice. There's there's that voice in my head, but there's this also thing that's listening to the voice or observing the voice. That's where I was at, just naturally going on. So put into bed way too early, nothing to do, drop into this zone. I'm starting to mess around with that little thing that I'm able to do, which is separate out what's that, or I shouldn't say able. That's not correct. It's like ask the question, who's this voice? So I'm in that zone, and as I'm in it, then I the wordings changes somehow, and it's like this is the part that I absolutely remember, and it is this me? Am I really here? Is this me? Am I really here? Is this me? And then pretty soon, I don't know, I have no idea. Space and time dissipate, all of that. And I'm inside of this idea. Is this me? Am I really here? And I go into this, what I know now would be a natural psychedelic state, because you get into this realm of observation and putting and kind of this consideration of the understanding of um, you know understanding the relationship between seemingly unrelated things is almost the best way I can just put it. And in that zone, I entered back into the knowing, not with the fox, not in the forest kind of way, but this other type of knowing. And this knowing basically said, not said in human words or English or anything like that, but just this understanding, this knowing that said, if you want to, you can just dissolve. And I'm like, what? Like, in this understanding what that meant scared me, because what that meant was it basically said, like, you can choose, like, your not reality, like, oh, I'm just, not like reality's talked about on the internet right now, but on a different type of reality. Like, you don't have to be here. And I don't mean like any weird, like, childhood, like, ending life or anything, not anything like that at all. Just like, this is all a choice. Like, do you want to know? Because if you, it's like people that pray, like, well, that say, like, I know it's on the other side. Well, in Native American way of thinking, if you think about that too much, like, you don't want to know what, that's why they call it Wakan Tanka. Wakan, sacred, Tanka, great. So it's basically saying like the great spirit, or the the or the other side, the great mystery, the great spirit, the great mystery. It's kind of, because those don't translate into English directly. Wakantanka, the great mystery, is like that's on the other side. They call it the great mystery because that's what it's supposed to be. We are an immortal coil, and if you want to give up your mortality to understand the immortal understandings of things, cool, but be careful what you ask for, because you're almost creating a reality where you'll go there to make that understanding, because it's a choice. And going back to the story about me going to bed way too early and having meditative experience, and me being inside this meditative experience, that's what it was. It was like this understanding of, you can release all form if you want to. And then I realized that, like, whoa, 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 okay, step out of it. And I was kind of deep into it. So I was like, and it was so lovely or wonderful or calm or just natural, that's what I thought. And then I was like, it wasn't like there was some outside thing influencing me or something that snuck into my psyche or my, you know, energy, or, anything like that. Because it's Oregon. And like you said, Bigfoot, UFOs, like, Oregon's Oregon. Oregon is its own place. There's a reason that people say keep Portland weird, because it's because there is something going on, and we all know that now, as far as people that are connected or learning how to connect to, these other realms of reality. But anyway, I'll stop there because I can just go on that. You've got me started into like what childhood's like, but that's what it was. And anyway, the end of that story was, I was able to bring myself out of it, and then I just felt like this knowledge, and this knowledge, now it was different than information. I had this knowledge, like, wow, I can do that. And it was empowering, not powerful, not at all. It was humble, and it was humility. And it was like, that's how you do it. Is how you do it is that you really accept yourself for who you really are. And once you do that, you can observe yourself and work with yourself. And that's where I understood that there was a connected spirit. There was a, I had the words God and Jesus and that type of things, because growing up Catholic, and as any
Yeah.
8-year-old, you're like, oh, I have to go to like Latin mass. Like, I have no idea what's going on. All I was up for was the pancake breakfast afterwards. There was some interesting things in there, but for the kid that age,
God.
you've got me for 20 minutes. But I'm like, there's a forest back home, and there's salamanders, and there's like cool stuff. I'd rather be there than this. And but it was that kind of understanding, was, wow, okay, there's a realm there that it's accessible to me, and it's lightly veiled, and I can work with it and figure out. And so that's how it was. And then I would start to like listen to people, and um but remember, this is 80s TV and 80s mentality and 80s level of United States, level of
Yeah,
knowledge.
of course.
So when you heard people do palm reading or tarot cards, those people were made to be caricatures. They were
Yeah,
made fun of. And I'm like, ooh, you don't want to tell people this. And that's why I
unf
was here for
uh,
20 more years by now.
unfortunately, yeah, I go through it all the time, and I talk about in the show all the time how when I was a kid, those were the people you see on Main Street in the weird looking houses, and you were told by your parents, "Don't waste your money." That's basically the bottom line, and that's all they talked about it. It wasn't a thing. I mean, it was in horror movies and fantasy movies. It wasn't like a real thing in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
Nowadays, thankfully, the spiritual awakening has happened, and most people have some understanding of it, or at least know it exists. And even if they don't understand it, it exists beyond their comprehension, at least. But it's
Yeah.
a real thing. There's enough people out there nowadays on social media and on the internet doing it. So I've talked to 300 plus of them. So yes, there's plenty of people doing it nowadays. But so guess what? Well, let's jump ahead here a little bit. So when did you actually start to look into what you can do, and like when was your actual exploratory phase where you could actually go find help to figure out what's going on with you?
Oh, that was not easy. Like I said, anybody who's growing up in this timeline or era of time, like, um, you're lucky. It's not woo
Yeah,
woo as much as it was. It's not, you're not a crunchy granola and, from Boulder, Colorado. It's not any, like, it's so normalized now. It's going through its own thing, kind of like the 60s kind of went through. I was born in 71, but
yeah,
just, the 60s had their hippie movement, and the 70s and had their the LSD, and the 80s kind of had their cocaine, and the 90s kind of had their ecstasy. Every kind of generation kind of has their exploratory substance of choice. So it wasn't ever, wasn't involved in psychedelics ever. I had like a little handful of, like a little tiny palmful of mushrooms when I was like 17. And, I was a little loopy, but nothing, off the charts. And it wasn't a bad experience. It was a good experience. But that was pretty much it. And then I went to art school, and in art school, somebody gave me a tab of LSD. And then that was like my very first. I was probably, I don't know, 22-ish, 3-ish at the time. And that was like where, you're, on LSD, you got like a 8 to 10 hour trip sometimes. And, after everything was done and I'm sitting there laying in my bed, I'm like, how come this won't stop? you know, and, but mine was a very pleasant experience, meaning that mine looked like, the color of like Star Wars lightsabers,
Of
so
course.
it was 3D geometric shapes, outlined shapes like dodecahedrons and that type of stuff. But they were glowing like lightsaber colors, and I was working with my mind to, okay, that one's kind of moving around, floating like a bubble. But if I gave it attention, I could hold it in space, and then if I could concentrate, I could make it bigger or smaller, and I can rotate it like 3D. And so that's what I was doing. And then I'm like, okay, that shape stays there. I'm going to create another, I'm going to allow another shape to form. And another shape was forming. And this was now not much later, is when I made the psychedelic connection. So I had never known what the platonic solids were. I had no idea. I did not know that there are basically 5 platonic solids. And the reason I call them platonic solids is Plato is kind of known to kind of memorialize this concept into a theorem, that there are 5 shapes whose angles, their vertices, when they connect, their vertices are equal no matter how many angles there are. And out of this geometric shapes, there's 5 of them that are the building blocks of reality. By reality, I think what I mean is, that's the woo-woo side of things. The physics side of things is mass. If something has mass, it has a structure, and there's only 5 shapes that are able to be made, or all mass is made out of these 5 structures. Sometimes 2 of them, sometimes 1 of them, whatever. But whatever the mass is that it's made out of these components, these platonic solids. And if you've ever played Dungeons and Dragons, they have those cool shapes of all the dice. Those are the
Yeah.
shapes. There's like 5 major shapes, and that's what they are. So those are at the molecular level or the subatomic level. Those are the building blocks of mass. And so I had no idea. And when those 2 things came together, when I learned about the platonic solids in my own research and going through it, I'm like, I felt like you ever, and I only say this because my brother and I were talking about this the other day. You've ever seen the movie The Never Ending Story?
Uh, I have vague recollection of watching it when I was a kid. I haven't seen it in years.
Yeah.
It's on
It's
my
a
list,
it's a
but
boy who's being chased, and he runs himself into like this warehouse, and in it is this ancient book, and he opens it up, and he starts to read about it, and as he's reading about it, he realizes the book's about him, and it takes him into this fantasy world. But anyway, there's this aha moment where he realizes the book's about him. And that's when I was like, there was that scene, I remember seeing it. It just came up when I had that connection of these platonic solids. I'm like, what I saw in my own mind, those are the platonic solids. And I just made that connection, and it was just like, whoa, there's a field of knowledge that's available to people, is what the end result of that story is. And this field of knowledge, this understanding, I'm like, wow, it is. And that's where I understand that's what it was. It was this you can call it Akashic records, maybe. That's what I've heard from, as I've learned that from other people who talk about that and study it. But for me, it just went back to, there's the knowing again. It's inside of that knowing where this information, this communication is available in different ways. It's like a library. You walk into this building, and it's huge, and it's massive, and it's all open, but you can walk down different aisles, and every aisle doesn't really have a separation. You can walk aisle to aisle, and the subject changes from subject to subject. And in my mind, that's kind of like what the knowing is that you can go into the communication aisle of knowing, or you can go into information aisle of knowing, and it's all it is just turning a corner from one aisle to the next. There's no separation, and there's different areas to access it. I'll stop there, but that's where I made the connection of a psychedelic experience, the LSD and the geometric shapes, to this other idea that there's an extension into our human beingness. That's why I said it's slightly veiled. And then a little while later, I heard, I think it was Terrence McKenna. He said, one of them, Alan Watts. I can't forget which one says it, but basically he calls it. I think it's Watts, where he calls it the doors of perception. And I'm like, man, whoever made. I didn't really understand who the gentleman was, because their story and their background and psychedelics. I wasn't there yet. All I did was hear the phrase, and that phrase was, psychedelics, help, something about the doors of perception. And in my mind, I thought that saying doors of perception was so perfect, because that's what they are. In that feeling, that's exactly what it feels like. It's like, wow, there's this door, and it's my door. It's inside, and I can open that door when I want to that level of perception. And it's not just one level. There's lots of levels of perception. But you can't kick the doors open all at once, way too much. But you can learn to open them, one at a time or two at a time. And then once you get that, you're like, okay, I see what's happening here. There's something going on. And then once you're there, I would try to look around to try to find other information, but it's so obfuscated that it's hard to find real information versus just who's trying to get attention. Or here's the other thing: somebody gets a big psychedelic experience, or a big spiritual awakening experience, and they grab it and they want to go tell everybody. So there's a lot of those people out there that they just had their own experience, and all of a sudden they get excited, and they now there's influencers, and they want to talk about it, but they don't really know that much. What they know is some really great language, and they can look the look, and they can talk the talk. But once you get a little bit lower, you're like, whoa, they're still in the shallows, but they're talking like, they really know. And so I learned to learn to see through that kind of early on, of that there's a lot of people that had a one-off or a two-off, three-off experience, and they're writing a book. And I'm like, okay, I just spent my time buying this book, researching the book, look at the book, and I'm like, they're still in the shallows. They just got excited.
Yep.
And went to go tell everybody else versus actually doing the meaningful work to really, really know. And so it was hard to find information.
Which that seems to happen with every different profession and experience. There's always those people who think they figure it out within a day's work, and no, it's usually not. Usually you don't. Usually you haven't seen the fine print yet enough
Yeah.
to understand what you're fully in for. But so, all right. So, are you basically? So, what are you saying? When you were a kid, that a natural psychedelics are what got you to that moment, the moment you had, and that.
Yeah, I think as a kid, the first one was meditation, and this experience in the forest. That was the first thing where I learned that there was a realm that I just knew as the word knowing, the knowing. And then a couple decades later, have a drop of acid, and then I'm like, okay, there it is again. It wasn't again. I kind of had it throughout the time, but just kind of at that same level. There's this ability to work with form and function and mind. That's when it said in that idea in the of the when I got into that looping experience, the message really came across that it was just drop all form. And the word was release all form. You can release form, or you can manifest form. And I don't really know what that meant at the moment, but I understood the scariness of my body leaving, because in my mind I'm like, what is my mom gonna say? That's the mind of a 9-year-old, but it was scary. That's why I had to pull myself out of it. Like, oh, okay, come out of this. You're getting too close, because it was so big. Not it was scary, it was just big. And I had the choice to ride it. But I'm like, it's kind of like being out in the ocean by yourself. Once you have the confidence and the experience and the skills, go sail your own boat out in the middle of the ocean. But I didn't have any of those. But I was still like the ocean was opened up in front of me. Like, if you want to go, you're fine. You're part of all this. That's what it was like. It was just so normal and natural, but also so immense. That's why I backed out of it at that age. And again, that wasn't the only time. There was other things, but that was the first and the most prevalent. And I would kind of touch on and explore it. But that LSD experience in art school was when it was like I made the connection of like I had it, and then a short time later, the platonic solids, and I'm like, how did I know that? And how did I know that? It was more like, how was that available to me? And knowing like anybody, it was like this galactic library. Everybody can know that. And a lot of
Yeah,
people have. It wasn't just Plato. Many people have. They just didn't have the wherewithal to memorialize it in a writing or a book or a podcast or a blog article, or people were just experiencing this off on their own. It just depends on right place, right time of who brings it to everybody else's attention. And then there's the circumstance of that person maybe is a respected physicist, and they're the ones who came across that information. Again, right time, right place, they did it, and it seemed like that was the inventor. I'm like, no, there's lots of people who know that person was just at the right place and in the right time with the right profession to be able to like share it. And then they had the credentials to people believe them, and that's how it is. And that's how I knew how humanity is. There's lots of geniuses running around the planet if they were to share the information, but it's not theirs. They just came across it like that's available to everybody else.
yeah, of course. Well, the connection I'm trying to make actually is because if you can experience these places of knowing as a kid, even without ever touching psychedelics, and then but if you go into it later in life and you actually get deeper in because of the psychedelics, then really psychedelics are just a way to open the mind to a part of the mind that we haven't fully opened yet, as ever. I mean, even a lot of adults don't open their mind to that section ever in their life. I mean, they just don't. But I mean, I know, I really haven't yet. I've, I've learned enough about doing this podcast and reading, but I never have gotten to that point yet. But
To the point of what, Jeremy?
of opening your mind in that section of your mind where it allows you to experience what you've been experiencing since you were a kid.
The practice of that is humility. And that is one of the things that a lot of people don't hear about. The humility, that is an interesting one. Humility is that thing to where you have the way that you get into that is you have this how do you explain it? It's like this way of you are very comfortable with yourself. You accept yourself for who you are. Like this has to do, and it's so much more difficult in society because we show the world so many different masks of who we want the world to perceive us, of what we want them to think of what we are, who we are, that we wear so
Yeah.
many masks. You wear the mask to your family, to your boss, to your colleagues, to people on the street, to going out, wherever you are. Everybody's got this idea of how does the world see me? And because of social media, it's even that more so than ever, like how the world's supposed to see us. So
Exactly.
if you can get to the original mask of who you really are, kind of like that, this is me and I'm comfortable with me. If you can get to that comfortability, then inside of that comfortability is the ability to release what you think you already know. Because that's the hard part, is because our mind is trying to make meaning of everything that our eyeballs see. And then every thought that comes into our mind, it wants to organize it into some type of meaning and attach it to something. But if you get this idea of like, I'm not trying to be anybody that I'm not, you're just trying to get to your original, genuine source of who Doug is, who Jeremy is, you get there. That's the first part. And then the second part is like that kind of that skill and ability that meditation teaches, which is there's a thought. It doesn't have to mean anything. You just recognize it a thought and then let it drift off. let it go. And that constant. And so what you're doing is you're clearing the monkey mind. So you're getting who you are. You're comfortable. There's a contentment. I don't need anything. I don't want anything. That's the humility part. Like I'm content with right and here and now. I'm in the drop. I can drop into the present moment without any pretenses or masks. So you're in a position of you're teachable, or you're in a receptive mode. And then the second part is so that's humility. Okay. Not humbleness. Humbleness is how you project to the outside. That's the humbleness is the projection or the action of humility. It's the feeling of humility, the being of humility that you're trying to drop into. So you can do that through meditation. And then the other part of meditation skill set, that's why everybody makes such a big deal about meditation. Because the other part of meditation is like you got to conquer your brain. Your brain and your mind, just like humbleness and humility, two different things. Your brain, 8 pounds of gooey mass. Your mind is the thing that is the field of understanding that your brain that soaks into your brain. It's your mind. And so your brain is trying to make meaning of your thoughts. And so meditation techniques is clearing that monkey mind, all those different racing thoughts that's like, oh my, because your body will consistently try to bring you back into place. Like, oh, I got all of a sudden there's an itch on my cheek, or like my knee is twitching, or I got this pain in my lower back, or whatever it is. Your body's trying to continue to bring you back into your brain, but your mind is the thing that releases the thoughts from your brain. So that's why if you can get into that meditative, there's a thought, let it go. There's a thought, let it go. So your brain is open and receiving, and your body is content. There's where the knowing can happen. That's the practice ground. That's the dojo, so to speak. You
Which,
walk into it.
which meditation, my old enemy. I never have been able to really fully meditate. I've tried for years after talking to people on this show, and it just never like it's. I ADHD. I don't know what the heck it is, but there's something that makes it not work for me at all. Like I just I've tried for so long, and it just I don't know. I have my reasoning why I think it doesn't work, but that's a whole nother story in like 5 episodes. So we won't go down that road. But so now I'm gonna ask the question that you expected first. When did you start thinking about opening the Church of Psychedelics? When did you think about starting to teach this?
Jeremy, when going back to meditation, it's such a powerful experience that I would encourage you to like do it in a different way. But this time, instead of trying to drop into meditation, start working with breath work. When people say like in through the nose, out through the mouth, there's a reason they do that, because it's a sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system that you're looking to balance. Your those are the two systems. That's your fight or flight, or rest and relax. Those are the two parts of your mind. So you need both to survive, right? You need your head on a swivel if you're like out, in the caveman days of, predator and prey, right? That's why we have it. Those are our primordial systems of our nervous systems. They're kind of pretty much binary. Then you put personality and experience, and what point you're at in history or whatever. Those are the things that add on top of it. But primordial systems in the body, fight or flight or rest and relax, like those are the two things. Like that's why. And then the things that allow us to rest and relax, kind of think of that as like after a meal. You're no longer like wondering if you're going to eat that day. You just ate, you're fine, right? That's kind of what I mean by like you're safe. And there's that element of safety that allows you to like be receptive to other things when you're not struggling all the time, when you're not like worried all the time, when you don't have anxiety of something's going to happen or not happen all the time. Then that's what I mean by the rest and relax. You're safe. You feel safe. And if you don't feel safe, that's why we're kind of like we get like worried. Some level of something is not covered. Something is not quite. I can't let my guard down because I'm not safe there yet. That's why where safety comes in. That's you know um uh like I said, the idea between the sympathetic and parasympathetic, and the fight or flight is like not always bad fight or flight. That's a really the far end of the spectrum. The fight or flight is more like, okay, I'm aware. I need to be prepared. I need to be like you're vigilant, which is not bad, but you're out in the world, right? You're going to work, you're parking, you're driving, you're vigilant, right? You've got things that you've got to, but when those two things are balanced together, you're breathing in. There are neurons and receptors through your nasal cavity that are directly touching the bottom pan of your brain, and that are firing off a whole neural network that's all connected in your mind, that's going through your veins through your body, that's exchanging, drawing and pulling blood up and down from that. So so all of those are being, when you're oxygenating them, just like I said, when you feel like you ate and you're fine, your oxygenation levels are fine. Your body has what it needs from that level. And when you're breathing out carbon dioxide, there you have another whole set of neurons that are of that process that are releasing. And that sense of releasing also is that sense of centeredness, of everything is fine, because you are releasing. It's kind of like when you release anything in life and you just feel lighter. You're balancing out parasympathetic and sympathetic. In through the nose, top of the breath, there's a moment in time where everything is just still. And you don't have to think about it because you do it over 1,000 times a day breathing. So you're constantly doing this. When they say work with the breath, that's the first piece. Work with the breath. And in through the nose, and just follow the breath, and just pay attention to the breath. You're not trying to figure out biologically all these neurons are doing what they're doing. You're just doing the most normal thing possible. In, out, and it's just cycling. And then once you're there, then you're like, okay, now that I've got my breathing, I'm going to remove my attention from the breathing and I allow the breathing to continue. But now I'm moving up into my mind. And my mind, not my brain, my mind. And let my mind observe my thoughts, my brain. And then once you start to work with that, then you're starting to see the brain like, look, okay, all right, I got to get him fed. I've got to do this. Doug needs a walk. Wife is going to be home soon. Like, it's just, that's a thought. Allow it to be a thought and allow it to go. There's another thought. And then you start to get, what you're doing is you're building a skill set of not allowing your thoughts to take over your brain. And that's why I would say, instead of starting meditation, start with breath work and then allow meditation. A lot of this is the word allow. And the other word is the big word is relationship. Build a relationship with it, and relationships take time. So I'll pause there, but that's how I would say, like, enter with people who have problems meditating. That's how I help offer that information.
Interesting. Definitely to put that into play. But back to the question I did ask. So when did you start the Church of Psychedelics? What was your mission when you wanted to start this?
Okay, so that one, it's a little bit different. So that one is, I was, I'll just kind of jump to that. Cannabis had started becoming legalized in Colorado. I wasn't part of that movement, but I watched it happen living in Colorado. And kind of parallel to that, I was moving from one industry into another, one profession into another. And I had been involved with hemp. Somebody was telling me about food, fuel, fiber hemp, that type of hemp. It's the same cannabis plant. The same plant that is hemp is the same plant that's cannabis. 90% of its life, the cannabis plant, is producing cannabinoids. And then it's just in the last few weeks of its cycle to where CB cannabinoids start to decline and THC spikes in the plant. And then it highly culminates in the flower of the plant. It's everywhere in the plant, but it's really concentrated in the flower of the plant. That's why we call it flower. And and then we harvest it, and there we got 90% of the time it's CBD, and the other part of the time it's THC. So anyway, that's I was part of the 90% of the plant, the CBD type of medicine of the plant, and building processing plant to, like, farmers can bring their hemp and get it rendered down into seeds and sticks and stems, and each one of those has something that you can render those into. But basically, it's the world of CBD, and I was always in the world of CBD for several years. And then what I was while I was making sure that hemp was legalized in the state of Colorado, um, then I saw this psychedelics bill coming through. It's called the natural plant. It's Natural Medicines Health something program, I think is what they were calling it. But the act itself was about natural plant medicines becoming legalized, much like cannabis. So Jeremy and Doug, we can grow cannabis in the state of Colorado. We can cultivate it. We can have it on our bodies. We can travel around within our vehicles. We can use it for personal use. Jeremy and Doug can gift it to each other. We can do everything around cannabis except for one thing: we can't sell it. And this
Yep.
bill was right on the coattails of, or not on the coattails, but it was very much like cannabis. Jeremy and Doug can grow, we'll say, this plant medicine mushrooms. There we can grow it, we can cultivate it, we can, render it into products. We can share it between you and I freely. We can travel with it. We
Yep.
can do everything with it except for sell it. So I knew that the boulder that those guys were pushing uphill of trying to get this through legislation. And Colorado's a weird state. Like, you think we're very liberal, but that's because it's the people. Our politicians are out to lunch. And kind of anyway, I don't want to say anything because I'm in this state and I'm at the have a lot of attention. So
Yeah, of course.
but yeah, our politicians basically the will of the people got this legalized in the state of Colorado for natural psychedelics. I was part of that movement because I knew the problems they were going to be having with state legislation and especially the politicians. And I also knew what was going to happen if it does pass, which it did. But if it does pass, then I was realized, like, then the politicians, that's when they start to like figure out, great, how do we dismantle this thing? How do we cut the legs out from underneath it? Because that's what they do with pretty much everything that's the will of the people in Colorado. We don't want their fracking. They do it anyway. What they'll just do whatever they want to anyway. It doesn't really matter what we say or want or hire them for. Um, and so just that's a lot of places. Well, Colorado too. So yeah, that's kind of where it started. Was I started realizing, like, ooh, these guys are going to be in trouble. They have no idea what the politicians are. The Some people did, but it's difficult because I was battling it in Colorado, here in Colorado with hemp. So that's how I got involved. And then um, once it got legalized, there was or became legalized, there was I think five different licenses. There's a license to cultivate plant medicine. There's a license to manufacture it. There's a license, I think, to render it into a product and distribute it. There's a license for therapy clinics to administer it. And then I think there's a license for like accounting, because the
Yeah.
accounting has to be very, there's a lot of rules around how to account for it. So anyway, I was up for a manufacturing license because of my CBD background with processing plants and building laboratories to distill those um, those materials down into a product, into products. And so that's what I was going to do. I'm like, oh, this is the birth of an industry, and so I can be right on the front of that industry. I know the manufacturing process, so that was my licensing. And then one of the co-author of the House Bill 122, the Natural Medicines Act, um, approached me, and we got together. And he's like, "Hey, Doug, there's this thing inside of this bill um, that accounts for spiritual use and indigenous, consideration." And I know that I'm very light skinned and my lighting is really blowing my, skin tone out, but I'm Spanish, like Spain, Mexican,
Yeah.
and Apache mixed. But I've obviously got the very light Spain gene, light skin color. But my background is I'm an altar keeper for some medicine people and the Native American tribes, and I've got a history of my background and family lineage of being involved with Native American spirituality. So from my professional background, from my blood lineage background, from my experience of direct indigenous ceremonies, sitting on jungle floors, to working with chiefs of the Lakota and different tribal nations, and I just had this really weird resume, so to speak, in order to like apply to go into this part of the bill, this psychedelics bill that had spiritual considerations and indigenous background considerations. And so that's when I work with the church. That's why I had to structure it in a Western minded way of, you know, how the IRS wants to see it and how the DEA wants to see it and how the state of Colorado wants to see it, how the federal government wants to see it. So I just came out with the full unadulterated, you know, no holding back with the Church of Psychedelics. I That's just kind of what it was. There was no other more clear way to do it. And because of CBD and hemp, I just realized that yes, the word psychedelics is bold. It's unconventional in modern society. It's been suppressed and oppressed for since Nixon, a little even before even. And so that was the organization of which I did it. I didn't want to name it anything different. I thought that to respect the medicine and to put it right out there in front of the whole world, um, not to be like controversial or anything, but just because in a couple few years from now, just the words like CBD, when you used to hear it back in the day, they're like, "Isn't that weed?" You know. But now psychedelics is not in a couple few years is not going to be a big deal, especially with the cures that it's coming with. You know, and I'm not saying cures because I'm making some sort of claim. It's happening. These are anecdotal things that people are experiencing. You know, migraines, epileptic seizures, dementia, Alzheimer's. You know, I know that you get into this very, um, you know, controversial world when you start talking that something cured dementia. Well, it didn't cure me, but somebody with dementia it certainly did. Go talk to them. So if you're a pharmaceutical company, that's the last thing you want to hear is that something natural that is non-addictive, has zero biological addictive properties. You literally can't become addicted to it. You can't overdose on it. You can have a really big experience and it could be a bad experience, but you're not going to overdose it. It's not going to kill you. You just let it ride for a few hours, just like somebody took a tab of LSD. You know, you can let it ride for a few hours and you're coming back. It's not going to feel like it when you're in it, but you can come back. And again, that's the scary part of it. There's so much of Hollywood about flying eyeballs and all this weird art. Not weird art, I love the art, but you know, this really psychedelic art, it scares people that don't have this experience. That's meant to, and to some degree, not the art necessarily, but just like how, you know, Nancy Reagan, this is your rain on drugs. I'm like, give me a break, right? Like that kind of thinking, like it's not like that at all. You know, when you have a normal low dose, regular, or even medium dose psychedelic experience, and you've got the training and the skills and the understanding and, you know, how to let something, you know, just release yourself into the experience and understand that you're not going to overdose and I'm fine, and you've got us, your mindset is correct and you've worked on it and your setting is safe. You create all of that together and it is that's why you hear people, that's why it won't go away. Natural psychedelics just won't go away because the profound experiences that people are coming back from that journey and going, look, I know that this is like, you know, not really acceptable in normal culture, but if you saw what I saw, you would require every president of the United States in order to be president. You would make them go on a large dose psychedelic journey before they're in charge of anybody or anything. You know, you're going to connect with the divine. You're going to connect with who you are. You're going to connect of why we're here and what we're supposed to be doing. You know, you're going to connect with a level of what I call the knowing, you know, that is like you're in a special club that is like, how come everybody isn't doing this? You know, I don't think it's for everybody, by the way, but I'm just saying, like, once you've experienced it, you're like, you can't explain it because it's your own personal experience. And everybody is like, you just need to do this because you have your own personal experience. But that's how I got into it is kind of there was a legal reason, there was a spiritual reason, and there is a time in humanity of where we're at reason. And I think that it took us a long time to get to this mess. It took a lot of terrible people, a lot of corruption, 750 years of abhorrent colonialism, of slavery and genocide, and, you know, toppling, you know, other nations to steal their resources so you can enslave their people. So instead of paying taxes to one, group of people that say God told them that they're above them, to another group of people that their God told them that they're above them, and they should, do what they say and give them all, a big percentage of their money. Like that kind of thinking goes away when you're on drugs, and like, how did that happen? So it took us a long time to get to this mess. It's going to take us a long time to get out of it. And psychedelics is definitely one of the tools that's going to do it. And that's why, because it's getting out of it's getting out of that us out of that stranglehold of thinking. And it's not going to happen in one generation. Like I said, it took us a while to get here. It's going to take us a while to get out of it. But it's going to be broken. The thing that's going to break those chains is things like these natural psychedelic experiences.
It's definitely, the world's changing, and it's definitely going to be interesting to see where we go in the next 20, 30 years with this type of topics. I mean, I never thought I'd see the day that weed would be legal either, and lo and behold, a decade ago, it finally got legalized in Massachusetts. So, and it's it's been a good 10 years, I'll say. But it's I've always been interested to see what. I mean, I've always been the side of the psychedelic mushrooms and all that too. Like, let them get legalized as long as they're being used properly, and let them get legalized so they get used properly. Let them get legalized so that uh, people who want to experience them can actually have guided helpers to help them get through it and not freak out and not. Because when you said doors of perception and you said you don't kick them open all at once, I think that right there says it all, because then that's what a bad trip is. Someone can open the doors of perception. I mean, am I wrong in that?
Jeremy, on my side, you broke up for about 10 seconds. I didn't quite hear the end. You went digital on what I could hear.
Yeah,
I can hear you
I had
clear
a
now.
feeling, but I was saying basically that when someone has a bad trip, yeah, yeah. So I mean, what I was asking, like, is when someone has a bad trip, are they kicking open the doors of perception? Like, is that basically what they're doing? It's just kicking open the doors of
Oh,
perception. That's what a bad trip is. Like,
no.
it's
So,
too much
okay.
at once. Like, the brain can't comprehend it.
Jeremy, great question. Because a bad trip is a lot. Like, here's a bad trip, right? You're 17 years old. Somebody, like, you're in a camping trip, and somebody goes, "Here, open up your hand," and they pour some caps and stems in there, right? You don't know what you're doing. You have no idea about the dose. You have no idea about your ability for dosing. You could be in a bad space. Like this, when psilocybin enters your body, when you consume it, and it metabolizes into psilocin, and that psilocin moves its way through the blood brain barrier, and it starts to seep into your neurons, your neurological system, I should say. And then the serotonin starts to affect the dopamine and the endorphins and the oxytocin and all that stuff. All that's what's happening, and that's the biological, procedure that's happening. But inside of there, you have this very amorphous, watercolory world of feelings, which are different than emotions, which are different than the meaning that you've made of your feelings and emotions, and all of that. And it depends on where your mindset is at. That's why they say, and I definitely teach the same thing, or share. I don't call it teaching, it's just sharing. You already know it. All I can do is just share with you and see if you remember, like, the things that I'm remembering. So anyway, that's why they say set and setting. When they say set and setting, what they mean by set is your mindset. Your mind is your mindset. Are you prepared to go into this space inside of yourself, first of all? And then, is your setting conducive, and does it support that mindset for that experience you're about to have? Because if you're not there and you don't do that, that's why you're going to be taught a lesson, or you're just going to go on a roller coaster ride, and you kind of got a janky like the safety bar that goes down. You're like, yours is a little loose, right? You're going
Yep.
up and down and twirling around like you're not prepared. And the thing is one of the reasons that there's a spiritual component connected to things like magic mushrooms, psychedelic mushrooms, is because there is a type of mystical relationship to be had there, because because that medicine will allow you to explore your spirituality. those things inside of you that are very much connected to the divine. You do not have to use the word God, although that's kind of the realm that you're touching. This other side, this understanding, this feeling of unity and galactic consciousness. And I don't mean to be out there like aliens, and we can go into that if you want to, for sure. Your psychedelics always has, that's the reason why it's connected to like all these peripheral realms of, you know of myth and lore and legend. That's why they're always associated. You see a wizard and it's got toads and mushrooms around them and those type of things. Or you go right, they're always in the background or associated because it's that alchemy from back in the time
Yeah.
of that time of alchemy. It's a time of, it's like when we talk about alchemy and like chemistry. You know the difference between alchemy and chemistry? Not much. It's alchemy and wizardry up until somebody goes like, "Oh, here's the mathematical formula," and then it goes into chemistry. Like, "Oh, we understand it now.
Yep.
Let's formalize it under chemistry." Or it's like, it's kind of like that. Um, it's physics and metaphysics. Oh, it's metaphysical. Oh, crystals and sage and all that stuff. It's metaphysical. Oh, we finally understand it. Western science, understood what indigenous grandmothers have known for 10,000 years, but they found it out last month, and now it moves in the realm of metaphysics to and woo woo to physics. Why? Because they understand it finally, and because they can put the
Exactly.
calculation behind it, it just moves it from woo woo to like, oh, now it's fact. In the
Hmm.
same. So that's the realm that psychedelics play in, and but yeah. So I'm sorry, I kind of deviated. The thing was the bad trip. The bad trip is because you're working with a medicine that has that profound level of ability to be in a relationship with us, and
Yep.
we're treating it as we're treating it like we do. It's like slamming a Red Bull or something stupid, or not something stupid, but just something that's irreverent. Let's slam two monster drinks and go, mudding in our 4x4s, which is cool. But it's like, there's a time and place for that. I'm all for that, but it's just that you're treating this medicine like that though. And that's not that.
Yeah.
That's garbage, right? This is life. This is knowledge. This is wisdom of plants and humans working together. So if you treat it with irreverence, you're going to get the lesson of irreverence. If you treat it with disrespect, the lesson you're going to learn is about disrespect. And those lessons aren't bad. Those are lessons we need. And sometimes people are like, you literally you were gifted the lesson of that in one experience versus having to learn it in a much worse way or over a period of takes you 40 years to figure it out. You can learn it in one shot. But people call it a bad trip. Well, that's because you're playing with fireworks and you're lighting M80s. What do you think's going to happen? You know,
Exactly.
you're lighting M80s and throwing them into the water. Like, yeah, something's going to happen. Like,
Well, there you go.
yeah, roll of the
There you
dice.
go.
That's the bad trip. The
Exactly.
bad trip is around irreverence and disrespect, and not taking
Exactly.
the time to like build. It's like like you and I are messing around. Doug and Jeremy are out in the backyard or somewhere messing around. We're like, hey man, can you do a cartwheel? And at my age or your age, we're probably like, yeah, man, I can do a cartwheel. Like, hold my beer, And it's like we do a cartwheel and we like, bust something up on ourselves. It's like, why did we just had a bad cartwheel experience? Like, no, we were disrespecting your body. You were over what's the word? You were over estimated yourself. Like you're like, dude, you're not 17 years old anymore. You can't do like you were unprepared. Your mindset was not right because you're just like, hey, I'm just gonna show off to Jeremy and show him what I can do and this, thinking I can do it. And you're like, oh, reality kicks in. That's a bad trip. It's irreverent, it's out of disrespect, it's you're not prepared. Those are bad trips.
Exactly, folks. And there's your lesson for the day. That's your lesson for the day. But and we definitely, if we get another one of these in the books, we could definitely hop into the extraterrestrial area of all this. I would love that. Don't get me wrong. I would absolutely love that conversation. But this has been interesting. This has been a very interesting learning experience for me. Every time I have someone on who is an expert in psychedelics, it's always a new thing. It's always a new world, and one I get to explore. But someday, maybe when my kids are gone and I'm old enough to have time to do it, I'd love to go down that road. But not yet. Not yet. Uh, but Doug, tell people where they can find you for now, where they can find the church, and any information they're looking for.
Yeah. So yeah, the Church of Psychedelics.com. The thing that I ask everybody because they just want to know more is just sign up for our newsletter. It's really good. It's only got a few things on it, so it's not overwhelming. And it talks about what we're doing currently every week. So any classes and I do free stuff all the time, um, just because it's so new to everybody. So classes and courses and workshops, um, bunch of free cool information on the website. But yeah, that newsletter at the churchofpsychedelics.com, that newsletter will keep everybody like current. And once you get it, at least you know if you ever need to like, there's that psychedelics thing that's going on, that spiritual organization community, then at least you know that somewhere in your email is that newsletter. You can always just type in the word psychedelics and it'll come up. So you always have like a direct connection to be able to find us. And yeah, and it's not always about psychedelics. A lot of it is just the human preparation, and psychedelics is the sacrament, and it's the sacrament of psilocybin. That's what you learn to work with if you want to. You don't need to, like, you know um having large dose psychedelic experiences, even for myself as the founder of the church. I probably go through, I do small, things here and there, but like microdosing sometimes, and things like that. And it's not all the time. I do it on intervals, but it's not all the time. And on a large dose, like, a couple times per year, maybe for me a few times per year. But I also work with other plant medicines as well in other communities and indigenous peoples. But yeah, come check out the community. There's a free, everybody's welcome. I just call it free member. So just come on. I think on every single page is something like become a member. And part of that membership is just getting a login and password so you can get into things like the meditation. I got a free meditation course in there. I got some other free things in there, like breath work and journaling and prayer and, that type of stuff. So yeah, come on over. Everybody welcome. And if you want to work with psychedelics as sacrament and get into some of the things we're talking about here, Jeremy, and you're in this great podcast that, yeah, we get into that as well. So you can work with sacrament there as well. And if
Well,
you're in
there
the
you go,
United
folks.
States, probably
Oh,
about 36 states or so, you can get it delivered to you.
well, there you go, folks. Go check it out. Go learn more, and you all know where to find me. If you don't by now, pure laziness, just pure laziness. But check the outro; it's all there, and I will see you all. I think in a week or two with another interview. So, and I clearly, I truly mean, Doug, you are welcome to come back on for a second talk because we definitely didn't hit everything we could have. So, always welcome to come back for a second talk, and I will see everybody next time. Have a good rest of your day.